Ready one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Bookmaniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am in a new place in my living room. Let's see how this goes. I cleared a spot in the dining room table, which Kenji and I never use except to pile junk on. So I cleared the junk away and moved the chair against the wall. What do you think? Anyway, I have a massive Friday reads to tell you about. But I thought maybe I should title this Friday Bales, but we'll get to that a little later. First, let me tell you about the books I finished. Then I'll tell you about the books I started. And then I'll tell you about the books I bailed on. I never remember which order I should do this in. Well, there doesn't seem to be any rhyme or reason to the order in which I present Bales, books started, books finished, books on my TBR. I always finish with books on next week's TBR, but other than that, it always seems to be random. So I guess what has the most juice for me is the Bales. So let's start with the Bales. There's been a ton of them this week. I'm very pleased that I have made the decision to bail because I have pushed myself for various reasons to read a lot of shitty books through to the end, and that is just the stupidest thing that I could do. So I got to do less of that and bail more. So get used to it, people. I certainly did this week. All right. My first bail of the week was the Eudora Welty novella, The Ponder Heart, which I was doing on audio. It was superbly narrated by some narrator with a wonderful southern accent, but her voice started to get on my nerves after a while, but the story was really boring. It was narrated by some southern woman, I think she was a spinster, about her uncle who got married, and it was a bad marriage, and he was a little strange, and his wife was a little strange, and it was all being witnessed by the strange spinster, but I didn't give a flying fuck about anybody or anything that was happening, so I listened to half of it and bailed. Which is too bad, because I loved Eudora Welty's Delta Wedding. It's one of my favorite novels from the US of A, but this one was not very good. I mentioned this in my book haul, and I've since gotten a correction about how to pronounce the name. But this is a Quebec novella. The English translation was just published last week, I think, or this month anyway, and I bought it. It was $20. In Every Wave by Charles. I gotta go back and find out. I got the comment from a subscriber just overnight, I think. Camper. Charles Camper, In Every Wave. And this was a novella about a man whose daughter drowns, and it's about his grief, and I hated it. The writing didn't speak to me at all, whether it was the translation. Nothing like dissing the translation and then telling you the translator's name. Gilles Lefebvre translated it from the French, but it was the kind of prose that I hate, that's overly poetic in fiction. I love lyrical writing. I love a certain kind of poetic prose, but I freaking hate prose that reads like where the character says to the reader emphatically, "I am a star," not a movie star. "I am the sun," or "I am a tree." That kind of poetic writing makes me want to puke, and this made me want to puke. So I didn't finish it. $20. Anybody want to buy it? It's yours for $19.95. And more disappointingly, because I didn't care whether I liked that one or not, but was the new novel, the translation of a queer novel from Greenland, Crimson by Niviaq Corneliusson. It started out pretty good. It was kind of a tender love story of a young woman that falls in love with another woman and realizes that she's queer. And that was kind of tender. But the more I got into it, that love story kind of went off to the side, and it was about her brother and this weird homophobic media closet case outing story. But mostly, apparently these were young adults, but like, I mean, they were working people in their 20s maybe, And they sounded, the writing made it sound like YA, like they sounded about 12 years old. I lost interest, so I read about half of it and didn't care about it anymore. So that one bailed, but, good to have queer literature coming out of Greenland. But that didn't work for me at all. And it was just newly translated. The translation was just published last week, I think. And as I'm on Steve Donahue's shit list, and maybe Laura Fry's too, I bailed on the essay collection by Zadie Smith, Feel Free. I read 20%. I listened to them on audio. And she's really smart, and that's her problem. That's the problem I have with her. She's so stuck up in her head that I don't feel a goddamn thing. I'm quoting verbatim from what I wrote in my 2-line Goodreads review, but I don't feel a goddamn thing when I read her. And I thought it would be different or it wouldn't matter so much in her essays. It does. She is so overly intellectual. I can't stand her writing. So I'm done with Zadie. She does a lot of good in the world. I'm glad she exists. She's not my kind of writer. The other thing that turned me off, less so than her off-putting intellectualism about absolutely everything, was that a lot of the essays were about popular culture. Like I suffered through a long essay profile about Jay-Z. Who's Jay-Z? I don't know who Jay-Z is, but I don't want to read a long essay about him. Like, I don't care about popular culture, so that was the other thing. Apparently, I checked the table of contents, and she wrote about literature at the end, but I can just imagine how dead those essays would have been too. And after all the torture I put myself through to read the first 2 volumes of the trilogy by Tsitsi Dangarembga, I bailed on This Mournable Body. I read half of it in the buddy read with Eric and Britta. I won't speak for them, but let's say that none of us were particularly enamored with it, but the prose, and I guess it's because I'd been slogging this was my 3rd volume for in about 10 days, the prose was making me physically ill. So I got further than Robert of Barter Hordes predicted I would. I think he guessed that he thought I would bail on the end of the first chapter. I certainly wanted to bail by about chapter 2, but I thought, I've invested all this time, let's see if it gets any better or whatever. It was a 1-star bail. If I really feel that strongly, and I've read quite a bit of the book, I feel no compunction in giving a star rating, so this was a 1-star bail. And I'm going to do a full review of the 3 books, and of course it'll be a bail review for this one, but I did read the other 2, and I do have some thoughts. So, if that interests you, stay tuned for that. So those were my bails. 1, 2, 3, 5 in a week. Doing great. So it cleared the space for a bunch of books that are going much better. Most of them. I finished a bunch of books as well. Many of which I'm planning to do a full review on. So actually this Friday Reads may not be so long, because I am thinking, God, all but one of them I'm planning to do a full review on. So, yeah, I won't say too much. I'll talk more about the books that I've started and the books that I will be starting, I guess. I finished The Spare Room by Helen Garner, and I talked very effusively about it last Friday, and I was almost finished. I did finish, and my effusiveness is steadfast, and I absolutely loved it, and I am going to be doing a full review. Just a wonderful story that is about like death and dying, and how to be a friend to someone who's fucked up with new age bullshit at the end of their life. It really tugged on my heartstrings, made me think, and it was a beautiful piece of literature. That was an accomplishment. To get all that into one little slim novella was amazing. Less successfully, and here's a piece of shit that I didn't bail on because of Heidi. Heidi wouldn't let me bail. This was a buddy read with Heidi of my reading life, and she wouldn't let me bail. What a shitty book! The Lady Who Liked Clean Restrooms by J.P. Donlevy. I mean, what was I thinking? With a title like that, the title was the best thing about this. I don't know if Donlevy has ever written anything worth reading, but this should have been used to clean the fucking restrooms. Just made me so angry. It was terribly written. he had a word that he couldn't get out of his head, unexpurgated, and he didn't use it all that correctly. I didn't think he kept using it in contexts where it wasn't about somebody's speech or somebody's written letter or something. He kept using it in really weird ways, and that was just one of the many jarring things. A really unsympathetic, perhaps satirical portrait of a Scarsdale woman who gets left by her husband and she kind of falls to pieces. Except for one half of one paragraph on one page, I didn't feel a glimmer of any sympathy for her, and I don't think he wanted me to. I don't know what he was trying to do with this book, but it was ugly. Ugly. Don't waste your time on this. If you think there's something else by him that's worth reading, I'd love to hear about it, and maybe in about 20 years I might try it. But, thank God it was only 126 pages, but what a waste of my valuable reading time. I finished this yesterday, and I really enjoyed it. It was a 4-star read, which means I didn't love it. I liked it. There were things about it that I really, really liked, and I'm going to tell you all about it in a short review. I don't have much to say about it, but I would like to, because it's a brand new book, just published, I think, this month or last month. I think it deserves a separate review, and I'm going to tell you a bit about my experience of Something of His Art, Walking to Lubeck with J.S. Bach by Horatio Clare. Stay tuned. I read a biography of a Welsh writer, Kate Roberts, despite not having ever read any of Kate Roberts' fiction. I'd never even heard of her. I'll explain more about how I landed on that biography when I do the review. I am going to do a full review, but more just as an introduction of somebody who didn't know a damn thing about Kate Roberts before I read the biography. I read the biography over, 3 months or 2.5 months or something, whenever Women in Translation was, and really enjoyed it. Got a lot out of it, so I want to tell you about what I learned about Kate Roberts in the form of a short review. Kate Roberts was regarded as the mother of Welsh literature, and she died in 1985, aged 94. And so her life was fascinating, and I want to read some of her writing. So those were the 4 books that I finished this week. I'm so close to finishing one more, but I didn't quite get there, and I thought it's time to film this because it's going to take me a while to edit it and get it online. Here are the books that I have started, and I'm really excited about most of these. Oh yes, I've started quite a bunch, because when I bailed on the audiobook by Eudora Welty, I immediately picked up another audiobook on Scribd. You may have seen my tweet or my Instagram post about it, or my Litzy post about it, because it really caught me off guard how deeply I fell into that audiobook, and I've since acquired the hardcover book, which is a gorgeous physical book, and so I'm now doing the 2 in tandem. It is Split Tooth by Tanya Tagaq, and she is an Inuit Canadian writer, but this is her first book. She is a performer, composer, and recording artist, and known probably most as a throat singer. I don't really know how to talk about this book. I'm about 40% of the way through it, and it's powerfully narrated by Tagaq on the audiobook, and it's not really, it's being called a novel. It's nominated for one of the Canadian Literary Prizes, but I would say it's probably not a novel. It's a collection of short pieces of poetry and prose that read as being very autobiographical, so it totally sounds like the kind of thing that I would complain about and not be able to get into, and I have sunk so deeply into it that it's hard for me to come back out. She ends each passage or poem, each little piece or poem, with a throat song on the audio. So this is going to be like Trevor Noah's memoir, Born a Crime, where I will forever be saying, every time you hear me talk about this book in the future, I will say, don't just read the book. But look at how beautiful the book is. But don't just read it. You must either not even worry about the book and just do the audio, or do the 2 together, because her narration on the audiobook is absolutely spellbinding. Adam commented on my tweet to say he was familiar with her from a Bjork video. There's lots on YouTube, so just put her name in and into the search engine on YouTube and you can find lots of her throat singing. If you've never heard throat singing, it'll be a little shocking at first, but it's so beautiful. The throat songs that she sings in between the passages evoke the emotions or the story that she's just finished telling through the throat song. It just fills your whole body with the sound. I have started the Zora Neale Hurston biography, Wrapped in Rainbows by Valerie Boyd. This is a buddy read with Doris of Audiobook, and it's wonderful. We've only read 4, 5, 6 chapters, I forget, 5 or 6 chapters. We're both really enjoying it. I have already fallen that much more deeply in love with Zora Neale Hurston than I had from having read Their Eyes Were Watching God. And I started this novella, Passing Ceremony by Helen Weinsweg, a Canadian writer that I've long been fascinated with but have read almost nothing by, and I am loving this novella. It's quirky, and the quality of the writing and the mystery of how the fragmentary pieces fit together. It's really captivating me. She was a Toronto writer and has been dead she died about the same age as Kate Roberts. She was in her 90s, I think, when she died about 10 years ago, and only published a few books. But this is one of them, this novella about a wedding. Can't wait to tell you more about it. And after I bailed on Zadie, I picked up a writer from the same demographic or similar demographic, non-white female writer that I have read and enjoyed in the past, Edwidge Danticat. And this is her, I think, memoir or essays. I am not far enough into it to be able to qualify what it is, but it's called The Art of Death, Writing the Final Story. And I've only listened to a chapter or two. Yeah, it's a memoir of her mother's death, and kind of essayistic or musings on how to write about death. Really enjoying it so far. I love Edwidge Danticat. She is not stuck up in her head. And after giving up on the shitty African novel, I've picked up one of the masterpieces from the continent, Weep Not Child by Ngugi wa Thiong'o. And I'm not very far into it, 11 pages, but it's starting out really good. It's a classic story about a young Kenyan boy that's about to go to school for the first time. That's all I know about it so far. And the last book that I have started, I just started a couple hours ago. I read the first 10 or 11 pages. This was in my book haul, The Story of Wales by Rhys Davis. And it's just kind of a survey of the history, culture, geography, everything of Wales, published in 1943. And I really loved the first 10 pages. It kept sending me to Google to check out things like Offa's Dyke. This is not a lesbian novel from Wales. This is the boundary between Wales and England, constructed in the 8th century by the King of the Mercians. So I couldn't quite remember what the Kingdom of Mercia was all about, but so yeah, fell down a few rabbit holes and gonna have a good time with this one. Did I just make a Welsh lesbian joke? I'm sorry. So that's what I've got going. I am just having a great time. And the next week's going to be just as exciting. In the coming week, I'm going to be doing a group buddy read of this novel, which won the Governor General's Award last year in Canada. We'll All Be Burnt in Our Beds Some Night by Joel Thomas Hines. He is a Newfoundland writer. There's a lot of good writers in Newfoundland. Apparently the Governor General's staff or whoever decided to give the award, thought that this was a good novel. I have my doubts about whether I'm going to like it, and I keep sounding cynical about it. I'm going to give it a try. So maybe this will be a bail by this time next week, but I will start it. And this is with a bunch of my bookish friends who were at the wedding, including Peg, who I think Peg's already read it and liked it. So I hope she wins me over. And all of the people in that bookstore run video that was filmed I filmed the day after my wedding, I'll put that vlog link in the show notes if you want to. So that's who I'm buddy reading it with, that lovely group of people. So we'll have a good time. So maybe I won't bail. But no, I can't read shitty books through to the end. Why? That's such a stupid thing to do. for me. You do what you need to do, but I almost made myself physically sick doing it too many times this month. This, starting from scratch, the Writer's Manual by Rita Mae Brown. I've mentioned it on every video of late, but this will be a buddy read with Chris of the podcast The Book Cookers, and I'm looking forward to that. And a hastily arranged buddy read with Britta Bowler of the Joyce Carol Oates novella Blackwater. So we're going to read it chappa-quickly starting sometime next week, whenever her copy arrives in the mail. So those are in the pipeline, and I am feeling great. I've said it before, and I know that people who hate DNFing, I actually saw a comment on somebody's video. A booktuber said that bailing was intellectually dishonest. It just made me laugh. Yeah, okay. But anyway, I've said this before, and I'm sure people who hate bailing and hate the fact that I bail, it just makes them angry, so I think I'm going to repeat it. Every time I bail and start a new book, I feel as wonderful as if I've just finished reading a good book and start another new book. It's the same feeling. It's like moving forward, open to new experiences, not getting bogged down in shitty books. Actually, there was a quote by Doris Lessing. Let's see if I can find it. Need to put it in my commonplace book. So let me close on this note. By Doris Lessing. There is only one way to read, which is to browse in libraries and bookshops, picking up books that attract you, reading only those, dropping them when they bore you, skipping the parts that drag, and never reading anything because you feel you ought. That's my credo, one of them. The other one, Steve Donahue knows, because I just quoted it at him on Twitter today. If you can't say anything nice, come sit by me. Those are my two credos. I need to get t-shirts made. All right, hope you're having a great weekend, reading-wise or otherwise. Tell me all about it. Thanks for watching.